Today we're going to talk about manufacturing, and to state the obvious, Illinois is very much a manufacturing state. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are almost 19,000 manufacturers in the state of Illinois, and they account for about 570,000 jobs. Put another way, that's about 1 out of every 10 jobs in the state comes out of manufacturing. Also, the manufacturing sector generated over $126 million or contributed over $126 million to the state's GDP. So that's 1 out of every $8 generated in the state of Illinois came from manufacturing. You're probably familiar with what a lot of these activities are: food, fabricated metals, machinery manufacturing. A lot of these products that are made here in Illinois, so the source of a lot of the state's exports. And one of the just interesting factoid that I found, at least, is that Illinois accounts for approximately 20% of total U.S. exports in agriculture, construction, and mining machinery manufacturing. So thank you, John Deere and Caterpillar and others. But anyway, this is a long-winded way of saying that manufacturing just remains a really important part, not only of the state economy, but it's also likely an important part of your regional economy as well. And as a result, it's good to think about how, from a local government or economic development perspective, we can ensure a strong regional and state manufacturing sector. So with this as context, I'm going to introduce someone who can help us think through not only what support and services are available for local manufacturers, but also how local government and community leaders can support manufacturing. As a result, I want to introduce Dr. David Boulay, who for the past 12 years has been the president of the Illinois Manufacturing Excellence Center, or IMEC. And the IMEC's activities, Dave's going to describe in greater detail here in a little bit. In addition to serving the state's manufacturers, Dave has also been an important advocate for manufacturing and economic development, both here in Illinois and nationwide. Prior to moving to Illinois, Dave served as the deputy director for the North Carolina State University Industrial Extension Service and has experience working in the manufacturing sector with companies like Pillsbury and Frito-Lay. He has a doctoral degree in workforce development and education from a Big Ten university east of here, an MBA from Franklin University, and his undergraduate degree is from Binghamton University. And most importantly, like myself, Dave is a native of upstate New York, which makes him, good people, generally speaking. So anyway, without further delay, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dave to talk a little bit about IMEC and manufacturing in Illinois.
Thank you, Mark, and really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. It's a little chilly out there, so hopefully you're staying warm and hopefully have a good conversation about manufacturing. And I'm going to set us up with a presentation here, cover a variety of topics, but again, hope we take some of the time to answer questions or things that are on your mind. I am going to start with sharing my screen and kind of walking through some of the elements that that we want to talk about. And so, the first one, kind of building off of what Mark mentioned, is that Illinois is just a manufacturing powerhouse. And regardless of what measure you want to look at, we're pretty much a top 5 state, whether it's output value, whether it's jobs, whether it's number of establishments. And when we think about manufacturing, as so many sectors of the economy, is really what a ride it's been. Coming through the pandemic, manufacturers were considered essential. Production needed to continue. Manufacturers figured this out. Manufacturers pivoted to meet the needs of the pandemic. And when coming out of the pandemic and settling in, we faced incredible supply chain challenges and difficulties. That settles in a little bit. And now we're faced with geopolitics that are reshaping supply chains in ways that in my career, my background, I never would have envisioned. And I think all of this sets up for a conversation. And there's an article that calls it a manufacturing super cycle. And I'm going to go with that word because I think we're about an 8 to 10 year window with this powerhouse of Illinois manufacturing, is just like everywhere in the United States, resetting itself in a new fashion, new form, and in their great opportunity. And so I'm going to get in a little bit about what's the drivers of that success as we think through it. And certainly part of it is around productivity. Underneath productivity is automation, as well as workforce skills, and no doubt supply chains as they are adjusting. The other part that I think this audience really understands well is that manufacturing succeeds with the ecosystem around it, the communities around it. And so when we talk about or think about the ecosystem, there's so many partners, so many players. And it's my pleasure to talk about one of those, and that is our organization, IMEC, the Illinois Manufacturing Excellence Center. It's one of those pieces of the puzzle as we think about the ecosystem for manufacturing. So as I go through this presentation, I'm going to touch on a little bit of that lay of the land, automation workforce, going to talk about some resources, supply chain. First, just going to start with a little bit of background about IMEC. And so let me just double checking that you can see the slide change. We're good. Okay. I had a little technical difficulty there, so I wanted just to double check. Illinois Manufacturing Excellence Center, IMEC, has been in Illinois 27 years now. And in our work, in the work that we do, we serve small and mid-sized manufacturers. So when Mark mentioned the number of manufacturers across the state, I want you to put this in perspective. 99% of those manufacturers are small and mid-sized. These are the manufacturers that we focus on to support, and I'll get into how we do that support. But we do this as part of 4 universities that you could see on the slide, as well as partnerships in many ways with the state, with the city of Chicago, with many local communities. Some of you on this call are familiar faces, names. So the work that we do is integrated throughout. And to be a part of that fabric, a part of the ecosystem of our communities, we are geographically separated out. So we have about 55 employees in total, and we cover the statewide. So we're within approximately, almost in all cases, within an hour, hour and a half of every manufacturer in the state. Now we do this, and this work comes from a federal policy that is with U.S. Department of Commerce, and that program is called Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So we're a part of this federal approach to serving the manufacturers, and this policy choice that Congress made 3 decades ago about how do we help make sure that small, mid-sized manufacturers remain globally competitive. So we are, there's one of us in each state and Puerto Rico with the same purpose and mission of waking up every day to help ensure our small and mid-sized manufacturers are globally competitive. And we do this through a wide range of knowledge, tools, and resources. Being on this call today, I think Manufacturing Extension Partnership, it certainly has some traditions and lessons learned from agricultural extension, that there's a concept or a parallel path. And again, I've mentioned a couple of times, but the communities and the ecosystem that we work together, particularly in Illinois, when we think about agricultural extension, manufacturing extension, that we weave together in very important ways. So what is it that we do? How is it that we help small and mid-sized manufacturers? And that first point or purpose of this is to strive to be a one-stop or a first stop for best practices for companies. The way I like to think of it, I grew up in a small family-owned business. I had the opportunity to work for large companies like Frito-Lay and Pillsbury. And the resources that a small company has as a supplier to the large companies, they're just different sets of available knowledge and resources. Or another way I think about it, at the end of the day for a small business, Friday afternoon at 5, there's a long list of things that didn't get done. Well, the company was focused on taking care of customers and helping with the business in so many ways. So we bring that added technical assistance for small, mid-sized manufacturers. And we do it in a framework of 6 key features of any business that helps companies succeed, out of the DNA of any manufacturer that we look at. So we look at areas such as what you see here, as far as helping companies with leadership. And leadership can take many angles to it, but certainly the development of the leadership team, but also very important in our communities with the family-owned businesses is around the transition of ownership and the work that goes in on the ownership of these companies, and that they maintain their local success and their local ownership. We call it planning for success, but really it's strategy. It's about planning for the future. It's about adapting to all the changes that are going on, the super cycle and all the opportunities that are there, or all the uncertainties, helping mitigate those. So we help with that aspect of a business. And then growing the business. Many smaller manufacturers in particular may not have a sales team. Rather, they have to think about different approaches to growing and market growth and diversification. And so we can help in that, everything from skills training all the way through to development of website SEO and the various other properties of marketing and outreach. So those are three elements in which we work with businesses. And then there's three others. And one of them, which is perhaps the next two are probably the most hot topics these days, which is improving the operations and investing in automation. So if you're familiar with the practices of continuous improvement, things such as lean manufacturing, anymore, I just say it's lean 2.0 because it's now about those continuous improvement skills and culture combined with the technology and automation. We also help with the workforce angle. So the skills development, the retention strategies, career pathways inside of companies. And then finally, about helping companies with data. So data and the use of data, we've sometimes feel overwhelmed with the amount of information that we have. Being able to take that information as a small manufacturer and make analytics for better decision-making is another pillar of our work. So I describe these 6 pillars. To give you a very simple example of this, one of the hottest topics is around cybersecurity, particularly companies that are tied to the Department of Defense. Cybersecurity requires a whole new set of expectations. It's built on a framework of that actually comes out of the U.S. Department of Commerce. Most small and mid-sized manufacturers don't have a cybersecurity expert on staff. So we'll work with the company through the framework and help them operationalize that framework to help ensure that they're putting in the best cyber practices to protect their information and data as work. That's, again, one simple example, but all these examples all of the work that we do goes into these 6 pillars. And we start with meeting the company where they're at. So whatever their urgent issue is, whatever their challenge is, that's where we start. And then we help build the best practices from there. That's a little bit about IMEC, and again, we'll be happy to answer questions, but I want to pull us out a little bit just on the general lay of the land. I talk about this super cycle or this change in manufacturing that's underway, and we are finishing up manufacturing month. So October is manufacturing month. I'm a big believer every day is manufacturing day in my work, but during this manufacturing month, during an 8-day period, we took a bus tour throughout the state. We had over 22 stops across we started in Metro East St. Louis, Carbondale, and all the way up through and ending up in Chicago. 8 days, almost 2,000 miles. And in that dialogue, or in those meetings, and in those visits that we did with manufacturers, and there was a wide range. Mark noted the wide range of manufacturing that we have, and we hit that wide range of manufacturing. But a few of the traditions that are so deep in our communities, that they're family-owned businesses, multi-generational. The number of companies that we went to that were, I know one that was celebrating 127 years, another one celebrating their 102nd year. That manufacturing is certainly in the DNA of our communities, even if we don't know necessarily what's going on inside the 4 walls as we drive by. We know that being makers has been part of our work and part of our communities for a long time. This is true whether urban or rural, it does not matter, but the work of manufacturing is one of the bedrocks in our communities. And across the board, when we talked with the companies, we talked about the partners and the various players supporting manufacturing. That the three topics that I touched on earlier, workforce, automation, supply chain, are the hot topics. And this trip was a reminder, again, that every day is manufacturing day and just how important manufacturing is in our communities. I share that because it also highlights some of the aspects a little deeper. Again, I want to go a little broad here for a moment about what it is going on that's changing the dynamics of manufacturing. And in particular, I'm going to start on the workforce and automation piece. And Mark, I know you're very familiar with this information as well. You've done some work in this area. When we look at population and population trends, we are seeing that U.S. Population growth is basically flat and even on the borderline of decline. And this one graph shows that on the left. And so for years, I've been hearing that we have a skills gap in manufacturing. And that is true. There's no doubt about it that we are changing our skills, and we need to adapt to those skills, and we need more people with the skills necessary to do the work. The other angle of this is that we are facing a bit of a body gap, that we will not have enough individuals available in the workforce. And so you look at a day like today where we're near full employment, and yet there are so many openings, not just in manufacturing, but in other sectors as well. On this slide also just notes that where the population growth is occurring is in our immigration population, the first generation population of our total population. So as we look at this dynamic, the demographics we're going to face this. There's nothing we can do to solve this one overnight. And that the intensity of this is only going to grow as we think about baby boomers. Really the last year of baby boomer retirement would be around 2031. And the generation that's coming behind is smaller. So the work that we have in manufacturing is not only about skilling, but also how we upskill to the next need or the next area, which is around automation. So productivity is about skills, and it is about automation. And I am the first, anyone who will listen, the first one to say it is automation and workforce. We're going to need both to work through this demographics challenge that we have. And it's one of the ways that we can remain productive and grow our economy, our communities. A few years ago, we went with a report. It's called Automation, Workforce, and Productivity. Have the link there. You can read it. It's about a survey that included 250 Illinois manufacturers, almost all small, mid-sized manufacturers. I did this with partnership with several folks like our friends at the Illinois Manufacturers Association. A couple of pieces came out of this. And the first piece was that when it comes to our adoption of automation, that we are lagging behind, that 2/3 of manufacturers made modest to minimal progress. And importantly, when we talk about small, mid-size, the smaller the manufacturer, the further behind they are in the adoption of best practices. And there's also macro data showing this to be true. Recent articles showing how other countries are significantly outpacing the United States in the adoption of robotics. So the automation and how we help companies think about the investments of automation. And what really, well, it might seem like a bit of doom and gloom that we're so far behind. What actually really excites me about this report and what came out of it is the approach to automation that companies are thinking about. The first one is not to just go buy the shiny metal object, go buy the new collaborative robot because it's cool. Rather, think about the process, the bottlenecks, and then figure out the technology that'll solve those problems. The other part and I mentioned this in the type of solutions or support that we can bring to manufacturers, is that the digital technologies, the use of data, the use of real-time information can be a great equalizer in the sense that it's not necessarily a massive or significant investment, but can help in the decision-making that makes a great return on investment, particularly for small manufacturers. Also, and I'm only brief today, can absolutely have a conversation with you later about this report. Something else that is teased out in this is the importance of workforce skills. And that is all over this report as far as we need to be thinking about the skills of the future. We need to know how to do change management when we think about automation and what it means, and that the two weave together for automation and for workforce. One of the things that we're talking about with manufacturers is how do you weave all of this together? And when I say weave this all together, it's that automation workforce pieces. And no doubt about it, it is all about the talent that we have and how we really develop that talent, because a robot can show up anywhere in the world. Our talent, we're pretty much settled in. We move a little bit, but pretty much we're settled in. So we talk with manufacturers on this approach around mindset, tool set, and skill sets. And so on this slide at the bottom, you see or the kind of the journey of an employee from being attracted to hire, onboarding, and all the way through, and the pieces of the puzzle that leadership brings for their organization really starts with the mindset and how they think about owning the skills of workforce and thinking about the investments in automation and being a part of the community, a part of the whether community colleges or others when it comes to being a partner in the community to help build the talent and help own the skills. There's maybe been a bit of a tradition in the industry in general of a bit of you train, I'll hire, but we're seeing that mindset adapt, which is we need to all work together to train and develop the team. And I think that's an important part. The other thing we encourage leaders to do is we call it a Gemba walk, and that's from Lean Continuous Improvement. What Gemba basically means is walk the journey. So we encourage manufacturing leaders, go apply for a job, almost like undercover employee or a future employee. Go learn the experience throughout of what an individual experiences so that you can help build out the talent of recruitment and approaches. So this is examples around the mindset. The tool sets, the skill sets are probably more common or comfortable in our language, or what we talk about more frequently in our meetings throughout the state. So it is about our approaches to recruitment and hiring, onboarding, culture development, job quality, employee engagement systems. These are the tools that companies can bring in to help bring the best culture, the best, most inclusive culture that an organization can have. And then with the advancements in automation, it is also the continuous systems of upskilling, things such as the internal career pathways, mentorships, and training. As one example of our work, we have 17 U.S. Department of Labor registered apprenticeships that we can use as tool sets, as foundations for manufacturers to develop their career pathways. We hope they'll go to the registered apprenticeship, but I also know that registered apprenticeships are the gold standard, so they become tool sets that we can help build the right standard for whatever the company needs to achieve, and can be a better consumer of skills with community colleges and others to say, here's the type of pathways that we need. So I bring all of this as a reference point related to workforce and automation and how we're thinking about it. Now, the next part that I want to talk about is supply chain. Related to supply chain, earlier this summer, the year is flying by, so back in June, we launched a supply chain center. This was part of the CHIPS Act. So the CHIPS Act has many provisions, most notable around semiconductors and helping build semiconductor manufacturing in the United States. There are other provisions that are in the mix of this. And one of those provisions is around this work that we're doing for supply chain to help in localizing and also helping support the needs of the federal government related to supply goods. So there's two components to the supply chain center. The first one is when a federal agency requests a waiver. So federal agencies have a Buy American provision. When they say, oh, I can't find that in the United States, I need a waiver because I'm going to go buy it from another country. That waiver now comes to our federal program, and those requests come to our each state in Puerto Rico. They come to our centers to go help find the domestic manufacturer that can produce that product. So that's one part of the supply chain center. The second part of the supply chain center is helping Illinois manufacturers find the suppliers that they need domestically. I am always rooting for the home team. I'm always rooting for Illinois and hopeful that those suppliers come from our state. However, because of our national footprint, we're able to help turn and find the right supplier domestically for the manufacturer. So all of that background. So if you go to the supply chain center, and it's imec.org/supply chain, there are really three parts here. There is find a new supplier, which is what I just talked about, helping identify new suppliers, become a supplier. In other words, those federal procurement opportunities, or an Illinois manufacturer looking for a supplier for something can find it on that become a supplier page. And then there's another page for partners for the ecosystem to help get you engaged in the work that we're doing with suppliers, help think through in your communities where there might be some supply chain opportunities. So underneath all this and the work that goes on, to give you an idea that the website, the portal, it's nice, it's handy, it's the small part of the work. The work that we do is starts with people are waking up every day focused on supply chain. This is a new approach for our organization. What we've always done, as I've mentioned in previous presentations, we've always been about supplier development because we help small manufacturers be better. So we've always been about supplier development. About the supplier connections, a little different storyline, a little different set of work. So we now have people waking up every day. That is their focus. Receiving requests, clarifying needs, searching multiple databases, helping pick up the phone, emails, helping the conversation, facilitating it. Is much about being a concierge service to support manufacturers. And to give you an example of this work that is not on the website, but is so much a part of this, recently in the Rockford area, there's the Rockford Aerospace Network conference. We facilitated or hosted a matchmaking event as part of that conference. This matchmaking event gave the opportunity for Illinois small and mid-sized manufacturers to connect with larger manufacturers in the aerospace industry, as well as federal agencies such as the FAA. In the course of a 4-hour time frame, we had 140 matchmaking meetings. In other words, dating for supply as part of this work with the supply chain center. So as an economic development professional, when I say supply chain center, I want you to think about particularly this concierge approach that we're taking, this thoughtfulness around mapping and local mapping, and this approach that we can take that is not only virtual, but also in person. I'm going to be just brief on a couple of these slides, but just to give a little more depth on what they are looking at. So one is about companies looking for a new supplier. And this has been pretty fascinating for me to watch because as we're watching supply chain reshape due to geopolitics and other reasons, we are getting requests for help us find a widget. Very simple, we just need some more bent aluminum. 2, we want to reposition our whole supply chain to 3 hours within 3 hours of our Illinois location. So the types of requests that are coming here are pretty expansive in the work that we're doing, and significant demand from manufacturers. So we ask to fill out the form, submit it, we set up the call, and then we really start the good work, that concierge service that I was referencing. The next page is around matching with suppliers. So this is, looking at the open opportunities. So I think if actually went on there just before our call today, there are currently 14 or so at the moment that include drone components, EV charger components, plastic extruded parts, aluminum sheet metal, just some examples of what's here that you can turn to as a community, that the manufacturers can turn to, that we're also doing our proactive outreach to help find solutions to these open opportunities. So that find the supplier, find the open opportunity, and I'll close with just one example of a result that we're seeing. As you might imagine, with many of these supply chain projects, we quickly go into NDAs, that these are competitive advantages, so we're not able to tell a whole amount of depth, but I'll just say, incredible stories that are playing out. But in this one, the company is seeking phenolic resins. So when you think of phenolic resins, I want you to think of printed circuit boards, types of countertops, and even my favorite, billiard balls. So there's a lot of reasons for this resin. And within a 45-day window, we were able to connect this company with 10 capable manufacturers and help bring that vetting down to 2 of the manufacturers that are heading, there will be contracting taking place. So this is an example of local sourcing that is changing the shape and the way we think about supply chains almost overnight. So I've covered a lot of territory. I've covered it pretty fast. I've covered it fairly high level. And I just appreciate the time that you take to have a conversation about manufacturing and to explore resources and want to just offer the best way to the next step. Certainly go visit the Supply Chain Center, visit our website. But more importantly, let's have a conversation, because it isn't long before these high-level topics got to get a little localized. And that's what we're about, is to help make sure that we talk about your community priorities and that we fit appropriately for those. So again, thank you very much. With that, Mark, I think I will turn it over to you. I'll stop sharing and see what other questions we have.
Yeah, we have, if people have time, if you want to add questions to the chat. Where'd my chat box go? It just disappeared. There it is. Please feel free to add things to the chat. We had kind of an early question on about kind of regulations kind of in the state, and you may not be necessarily in a position to advocate for which regulations you'd like to see, changed or whatnot. But how can IMEC or does IMEC help companies navigate regulations or make sure that they're compliant with regulations over time?
Yeah, when it comes to these regulations, that's where we turn to our great partner, Illinois Manufacturers Association. That's their real strength, and so we'll turn to them on that. There are a couple of things I'll mention, that I think are interesting to watch, and one that just needs to be addressed immediately. And I shared that with some staff of elected official even earlier today. So on the federal level, the R&D tax credit has expired. And that is one that has to get reset as soon as possible. That manufacturers are going to be held back in their investments in research and development. And I won't go into a lot of depth about that one, but that's one that I know just has to get resolved as soon as possible. Specifically within Illinois, I think there's some interesting things to watch, and I will admit, again, not the expert here, but I continue to scratch my head as far as how we navigate where the future is going with manufacturing. Illinois has put together a whole new set of packages around the electric vehicle, the transition in automotive, the transition for clean energy. These pathways are coming, and the state has seemed to have set itself up well relative to some of those incentives and some of the work that goes on. Notably, even the news out of Belvedere this weekend with an EV battery plant coming in state, I think is an example. So probably not good at answering what regulations need to be repealed. Happy to take offline or at least make the connection to the experts that know that work.
Another question is, we certainly with the pandemic, there was big shocks to the supply chain. One of the questions we have here is what could cause a possible repeat of those issues during the pandemic. But maybe it's kind of kind of a complementary question to that is like, what lessons have been learned from that experience to mitigate against some of the kind of real negative consequences of it, if something was to happen again?
Yeah, boy, let's hope not, right? But I think a couple things. Overly extended supply chains, right? That's the first one, is this global stretch of the supply base, and the ability to get the minute that line is so thin that it easily breaks, whether it's because we were reliant on one manufacturer, or that the port in LA was so congested we couldn't get things off the boat, or a manufacturing center in another country really suffering with COVID losses and really hunkered down, right? So those are some of the elements of the supply chain that I think we've felt the pain on. I've been asked the question a little differently, is that manufacturing is always built on just in time. Is just in time the wrong approach? Because just in time assumes you have the product at the right time at the right moment. And I think what came out of the pandemic was not as much just in time. Rather, let's see how much extra inventory we can put on the shelf. What I am seeing is that is retracting very quickly again because of the high interest rates. The carrying cost of inventory, just a year and a half ago was pretty low, and now it's gotten pretty expensive. So I do have a concern about that, but I think just in time in its own right is a very safe strategy, as long as and something that I'm hearing from a manufacturer we're talking with, which is redundancies in their supply chain. So not being solely reliant on the concept of sole source manufacturing, rather having redundant systems of sourcing, I think is more important, more critical to prevent a future issue than, say, just in time might be.
Here's a question. What country or country in the U.S. or Illinois for opportunities to build the next manufacturing facility? So in terms of foreign investors, where are you seeing interest coming from in Illinois? And you also sit on the board, if I'm correct, of Intersect Illinois, which would work on some of these issues as well.
Correct. Boy, I'm trying to think of what country I'm not seeing it from. I think it's a fascinating time, because you have the whole new, what is that, USMCA, right? The whole new North American trade agreement that's got some interesting dynamics around it and shifts on it that make this one cohesive market. And so I'm just I don't know how else to say it, Mark, but incredibly blown away by the amount of activity that I'm seeing. That again, a decade ago, I wasn't seeing. 5 years ago, I wasn't seeing. If I were to say which countries, I'm going to be kind of boring, because it's going to be the larger company or countries.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects, right? The other part that I will note on this, and that I'm seeing with this great excitement, I had heard about reshoring for a decade, right? And the concept of let's bring manufacturing back. And I would be like, yeah, I'm not really seeing it out there. It must be somewhere. I'm walking into companies now and I'm seeing it. And I am seeing it on products that I never would have thought happened. It was actually on our bus tour, manufacturer in Aurora that makes brooms and mops, a common name brand, 100% reshored back to the United States, to Aurora. Through the investments and skills, through the investment in automation, just an incredible story of reshoring that I am seeing from there to gearboxes to other products that is just wonderful to see.
Well, on taking that international lens of it, you mentioned, the importance of kind of immigration as a source of people coming in. And we know, at least in the kind of the entrepreneurial community, there's a lot of entrepreneurial energy and a lot of kind of Hispanic communities around the state. So to what extent is, as IMEC is doing its work around the state, are you working with, whether it's Spanish speakers or how are you preparing yourself to work with those kind of entrepreneurs and small manufacturers?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's I'm going to broaden it just a little bit, which is, our communities, our population has become more and more diverse, unlike ever before. A couple of years ago, we created a role, we call it the Director of DEI in Manufacturing. The reason we created this role is most large manufacturers are going to have their Chief Diversity Officer. Small manufacturers, and it's just not going to happen, but they deserve the tools and resources for that. And so we built this work and the plan of work related to more inclusive cultures as well as expanded talent pipelines. And I think that piece in particular, Mark, is what gets at your question about expanded talent pipelines, is helping the manufacturers look at the type of work that they have and how do we help through new means of recruiting and new communities for recruiting. So a Hispanic community, absolutely. Another community that is partners that we're working with is with the neurodiverse work setting. So think of autism and the communities that got a twofold project, right? The one is helping the workplace be prepared and helping then the individuals be ready for the work that they're going to have. And so these are some examples of how we're doing that. We also bring the language skills as needed or help in translation as needed. But that whole body of work, as we think about the population that we have, the demographics, that we've got to look at all types of populations and help be a part of our great teams in manufacturing.
We still have time for questions if people want to add questions. Another question that I have is, you mentioned kind of the concierge approach, and I would imagine that a lot of the folks on the call, if they're working in, for like their local economic development shop, that's kind of the role that they serve. People come in with ask kind of question, and maybe they refer them to kind of the Small Business Development Center. So that's why it's good to know, certainly it's good to know about IMEC and its work, because it's another place that they can refer folks to. So I guess ultimately my question is, in that role, how do you work with other service providers like the SBDC? Do people come into you sometimes like, that's actually a better spot for the SBDC than it is for us, or that's a better question for DCEO than it is for us? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark, and I think so important. And I used that word earlier, ecosystem, right? It is all those players that bring unique expertise that just have to be part of the portfolio of work. One example, so the supply chain center, as I noted, is about effectively federal procurement. We're helping identify gaps in federal procurement that are domestically sourced and identifying potential manufacturers that could domestically produce that product for the federal government. We're not procurement experts by any means, so we're good at being able to know the supply chain need, the requirements for the supply good. Can the manufacturer produce that and have the capacity? But the Apex or the PTAX of old, as part of the SBA portfolio, is an example of a set of organizations so vital to supply chain work. When it's SBDCs, when it's community colleges, local economic development players, we work with in so many ways, and it's very much just following up on the lane and making sure that we refer the right expertise to the right folks.
All right, and workforce, we'll have one more question here before, if anyone else has questions, feel free to jump in here. But as you travel, the state, I think a lot of people, that manufacturing workforce issue is the thing that folks are just going to hear. It's going to be the thing that's at the forefront of their minds, the thing that they're going to hear most. When you travel kind of the state and you see different communities, the communities, what were the communities that were best at promoting kind of workforce or manufacturing careers? What were they doing that set them apart? Like, oh, that's a community that really understands how to promote careers. Was it, promoting opportunities for work-based learning? Was it, close relationships with community colleges? What was what were those the communities that were really successful at promoting manufacturing? What were they doing to be successful?
Yeah, very simple description, the integrated approach. And I'm going to turn that a little bit, and particularly from that employer lens. I mentioned earlier about the mindset of manufacturers to be the partner. Those manufacturers, or those group of manufacturers that have said we have to co-own the skills, right? The skills need that we have, it's weaved into our community, and therefore we need to be a part of the community. And so those situations that we see that happening are the examples of what I would call success or progress. Again, I don't know if we've solved the workforce challenge, but I see the progress. So I think as community leaders, our ability to have the manufacturers really engaged in that dialogue, even with their busy schedules, knowing that they're part of this, that it becomes that employer-driven model. Those are the areas where I see best success. I wonder, Mark, and I was just going to say, I wonder, Mark, and I'd even toss the question back to you in a bit, is my perception as well is that rural communities it's more challenging, right? In the sense that the population demographics are more difficult. And I don't know how we help as a state, how we can help overcome those challenges, or help make sure that there's a well-crafted solution set in the rural communities. I don't know if you see anything different as you're getting out there, but I note a difference based on the size of the community.
Yeah, no, I know the demographic challenges are certainly something that a lot of communities, particularly in rural areas, are facing. And for a lot of folks, they got to create opportunities for folks to. It's not even an attempt to attract people to either return or move there or return. It's really how do we retain what we got, and they got to give people opportunities or reasons to stay. And I think certainly manufacturing, just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, but I think manufacturing is one of those jobs for folks that aren't necessarily college bound, can create real opportunities. But for those opportunities to be there, there needs to be close relationships between kind of the employers and the communities, between whether it's opportunities for career and technical education or work-based learning opportunities, and employers need to be really engaged in that process, which is hard to do if you're a small business, and if you got if you have enough time for outside things, you don't have enough work, and if you have enough work, you don't have enough time for those things. So
exactly,
that's always kind of a small business challenge. So with that, I'm going to turn Mike Delaney, who's on our call here, we'll have a poll. First of all, I guess before turning it over to Mike, Dave, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to do this and to introduce folks to kind of the work of IMEC and make sure that they know that you're there. So when they are speaking to manufacturers in the community, they know that there are folks in the state whose job it is to think about manufacturing every day and to its betterment. So thank you for taking the time to chat with us. We really appreciate it. And with that, I'll turn it over quickly to Mike Delaney if you have a few announcements. We have a survey. Basically, we just have a quick survey that we'd like you to take, that just to make sure that we know that kind of when you get to the end of it, that end of the webinar, that hopefully you've learned more about manufacturing in Illinois. So with that, I guess I'll when you're done taking the survey, everyone have a nice afternoon. And with that, thanks again, Dave. We appreciate it, and we'll be seeing your bus around the state. What next October though, right? Next October, the bus is back in the garage for now. And will it be an EV bus? I guess that would be the question. We make those in Illinois, right? We make those.
That's right, we do. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks, Dave. Much appreciated.
Thank you.